Hey guys, I'm Grestar, and how about we talk about the upcoming death battle, Tracer versus Scout. Basically, this is one of the first times where I really know both of the characters. I've known both of the characters in past death battles, not frequently, but I've known them. But this one, I actually really feel like I know these characters. To give a bit of insight, I have played 78 hours as the Scout in Team Fortress 2, which some of that, granted, is trade servers and stuff, and 18 hours as Tracer. I've played TF2 a lot longer than I've played Overwatch so far, just because of how long Team Fortress 2 has been out, and I've actually played more of the Scout if you count my time back when I played on the Xbox 360 instead of the PC, but I don't have those numbers available, so I can't tell you. But I'm just saying that I do know both of these characters, and so now I want to offer my prediction and just my insights onto this, my thoughts, how I think that it could go down. First, I want to get out of the way what I think is the biggest thing in Scout's favor, and that would be if they decided to give Scout all of his weapons, which I think would be a big mistake, for a couple reasons. One, in the games, in Team Fortress 2, he cannot have all of his weapons. He has 3 weapons, his primary, his secondary, and his tertiary / melee weapon. That's it. In previous death battles, like Master Chief versus Doom Guy, sure, they got to have all of their weapons, but that's because, in the game, they could have all the weapons, or they were, really readily accessible. In TF2, the only way that you can change your weapons is if you die or go back to the spawn room, which would just be kind of silly to have them go back to the spawn room during a death battle. And then in another death battle, Link versus Cloud, they gave Cloud just the weapons that were they weren't his starting weapons, but they were the ones that people supposedly knew him best for. They were his most iconic weapons. Even though Cloud has access to a lot of other weapons, to a lot of other abilities and items and everything, they just gave Cloud those few. So I think that the precedents have already been set, and I think that it would be ridiculous if the Scout got all of his weapons. Think about it, Tracer only has her pistols and her pulse bomb. Those are her weapons. And the Scout has 21 different weapons. I wrote this down, hold on a sec. The Scout has 6 primary weapons, 7 secondary weapons, and 8 melee weapons. That's ridiculous. Oh, and keep in mind, when I say he has 21 weapons, I'm not counting any just different skins. All of those weapons, all 21 of those weapons have different actual in-game effects. If he could just pull all of those out of nowhere, that'd be crazy. It wouldn't make sense, and it would be unfair. That is my stance on it. You're allowed to think differently, but I think you're wrong. In my opinion, the Scout should have his stock weapons, his scattergun, the pistol, and the bat. That's it. And sure, you can think back to Link vs. Cloud, where Cloud didn't necessarily have his starting weapons, but the ones that were most iconic of Cloud. So I am fine with saying that the Scout can have 3 weapons mixed between those, but only 1 primary, 1 secondary, and 1 tertiary. Now, I'm not one for math, but when you have 6 primary weapons, 7 secondary weapons, and 8 tertiary or melee weapons, that's a lot of different combinations if you're gonna have 1 of each and you could just mix them up in whatever order you want. I can't imagine how you would actually, decide which ones to include unless you just stuck with the stock. It's the stock for a reason. Not to mention that in Team Fortress 2, none of the weapons are necessarily better than the others. None of them are necessarily improvements. So, okay, that might be wrong in 1 or 2 cases, with the medic, I'm thinking, with his bone saw. But that's really not the case here, and so it's not a matter of if the Scout has his stock weapons, oh, you're giving Scout the worst weapons. No, not at all. It's just saying these are stock for a reason. These are what the Scout's known for. Granted, he has been seen to use other weapons during their official little cinematic shorts, in the trailer for MVM Man vs. Machine. He actually had his Sandman, one of the bats, instead of just his stock bat. So I guess that's kind of iconic, but that's only 1 weapon. Alright, so those are my basic thoughts on that. Just to recap, I don't think that Scout should have his entire arsenal at once. I would be fine if they decided to mix up his weapons, but only 1 primary, 1 secondary, and 1 tertiary, and I can't imagine how they would decide on which weapons and how they would really justify that when there are that many, and none of them are necessarily better than the others, etc. Especially when you already have the stock 3 to choose from. It wouldn't make sense because of the game he comes from. It wouldn't be fair because Tracer only has her pistols and her pulse bomb, which is her ultimate that she has to work for. And that's, yeah, I'm there. I'm standing there. So now to throw some numbers at you. I don't want to do too much, but I looked up their wikis and the damages and the times that it takes to reload or fire or whatnot. So I want to share those with you because I think that those definitely can make a difference. And for these numbers and everything, everything past this point really, I'm just going to make the assumption that the Scout is only going to use his 3 stock weapons, which are again the scattergun, pistol, and bat. I'm also going to talk under the assumption that the health pools for the 2 characters in the 2 worlds are equal. And I don't mean they have the same health, but I mean that Scout's 125 health would also be 125 health in Overwatch, and Tracer's 150 health would also be 150 health in TF2. Those are my assumptions. They're not necessarily correct, but it's the best I have to work with. If we were going to have them have a pure melee battle, counting on all of their other weapons and all of the other skills between the 2 characters, the Scout would win. Basically, he does more damage per hit at 35 and Tracer only does 30, and he can attack in 2 seconds 4 times, whereas Tracer I think can only attack 3 times in 2 seconds. I could find the number on the TF2 wiki for Scout's melee speed. I could not find an actual number for Tracer's, and I didn't test it, but I've played her, and I've meleeed, and I just feel like it's slower. Not exactly once per second, but I could be wrong. Either way, I'm saying that the Scout I think would win in a pure melee battle, so all of you people who are voting for the Scout should be happy about this part. However, obviously they're not going to have a pure melee battle, and they're not going to just disregard the character's skills, so we have to think about it a little bit more. So I can't exactly do a back and forth because, as I said before, Tracer only has her pulse pistols, and the Scout has his pistol and his scattergun. So I'm just gonna talk about the Scout really quick. Let's begin with his pistol. Now, it's meant for taking out characters at medium to long range, but it actually does more damage at close range. There is damage fall off even with the pistols. So at its maximum damage, it would do 22 damage per shot, and at its minimum, it would do 8. So the pistol can fire once every 0.17 seconds, so about 6 times a second, at minimum doing 48 damage, and at maximum doing 132. The pistol actually has 12 ammo, so that means in 2 seconds, you can go through the entire clip and do a minimum of 96 damage and a maximum of 234. So if Scout were able to hit Tracer with each bullet at long range, it wouldn't quite kill her, but it would definitely weaken her. At medium range, I didn't do the calculations, but I think it would kill her, and at close range, it definitely would kill her. Once he runs out of the clip, the reload speed is 1.25 seconds, so he could reload that pretty quickly. So now let's talk a bit about the scattergun, his primary weapon. The scattergun can fire once every 0.625 seconds, so about twice a second, and it does a lot of damage at point blank. At point blank, it can do between 90 and 105 damage, so 2 shots would easily be able to kill Tracer. At medium, it starts to do less with 10 to 40 damage, and at long range, it's 3 to 10, so it's not a long range weapon by any means due to the bullet spread, and just general damage fall off. But yeah, basically, point blank can kill Tracer in 2 shots, medium range can kill Tracer in 4 shots, and long range, you are going to be pelting Tracer with a lot of scattergun bullets in order to kill her. I don't know about weapons, so if I say clip and I'm supposed to say magazine or whatever, forgive me, but anyway, the scattergun, unlike the pistol, which reloads everything in one clip, reloads only 1 at a time. So the scattergun can hold 6 shots, and every time he shoots, he has to reload individually. Or rather to say, like, if he reached 0 shots, he would have to reload 1, and then 2, 3, all the way back up to 6. The first time he reloads, it takes 0.76 seconds, and after that, it only takes 0.56 seconds for each consecutive reload. So the first time takes the longest, but only by 0.2 seconds, and then after that, it's a consistent 0.56. Now that we have that out of the way, it's finally time to look at Tracer and her pulse pistols. So from what I could find by looking it up online, and numbers can change because especially since Overwatch is new, things are still being patched and updated and everything, but from what I could find, her pistols have damage fall off, and they do between 1 and 6 damage, like per bullet. She has 40 ammo split between 2 pistols, so that's 20 shots each. And if she were to empty her entire clip into the Scout at point blank range, she would deal 120 damage with 1 gun. But again, she's firing 2 guns, so at 120 damage each, if she were able to land every shot, she would deal well enough to kill Scout. I mean, assuming I'm running all this correctly in my mind, so if she has 40 ammo split 20-20 between her pistols, she does 6 damage maximum at close range, then that means with 1 pistol, 6 times 20, 120, the other pistol, 6 times 20, 120, 240, right? So that means that if she depleted just half of her ammo into the Scout, she could just finish him off with a quick melee attack. Because in TF2, if we're talking about game mechanics, you actually have to like switch to your melee weapon in order to start meleeing. In Overwatch, you press a button. It's meant for finishing off low health people, so if she were able to get, like, empty her entire clip and only get half of the bullets into the Scout at close range, she could then melee him and finish him off with like 20 damage excess, doing a minimum amount of damage. So if she were firing at the Scout from a long range where, you know, bullet spread and everything and damage fall off takes effect, she would only do 1 damage per bullet, but she has 40 bullets, so that would do 40 damage, which I know isn't a ton. However, it is a third of Scout's health. So if we take her damage at the middle ground, so I'm assuming a medium range with, you know, kind of the middle bullet spread sort of deal, she would deal again 120 damage if she landed all 40 of her bullets on the Scout, and that's again leaving him with 5 health. Now to me, those numbers already seem to be in Tracer's favor. They both prefer being at close range, like point blank range, and she attacks slightly faster than the Scout. As I said, the scattergun at point blank range could take out Tracer in 2 shots, and that sounds pretty impressive when hers takes like 40. But the 2 shots from the Scout's scattergun take 1.25 seconds. It takes 1 second for Tracer to unleash her entire clip. That means that if they were both at point blank range and they both had perfect aim on each other, Tracer would win by 0.25 seconds. She would be close to dying, one more shot would take her out, but those 0.25 seconds do make a difference as far as gameplay mechanics go. Now, I will kind of interrupt myself here to say that in Death Battle, game mechanics shouldn't be everything, because game mechanics are certain ways for certain reasons, you know? There are some things that I think should be overlooked. However, if we want the best picture, we only have so much to look at for these two characters, given the worlds that they come from, the games that they come from, and everything, so I think that we do kind of have to acknowledge certain aspects. So while it might take Tracer's entire ammo count of 40 bullets to take out the Scout, and Scout only takes 2 of his 6 shots in comparison, Tracer can just do it faster. I mean, if you want my opinion, I think that Scout would have a better chance if he just stuck with his pistol almost the entire time, because, you know, up close, Tracer would win, I think, because she's faster, and medium range, I think the pistol might do enough with that kind of middle ground pistol damage to beat her before she could beat him. But that's talking purely numbers, and I didn't even mention the headshot damage that Tracer can do. Tracer is able to get headshots, just lining up a shot with the head does double damage. So you can imagine the kind of effect that would have on the Scout. Now, I bring up the headshot with Tracer and not crits with Scout because with Tracer, it's an in-game mechanic. If you aim at the head, you do double damage. With the Scout, the crits are only random. Again, assuming they're using the stock build. That's what I'm talking about, the 3 stock weapons. There is no in-game mechanical way for the Scout to get crits with the stock weapons. There are only random crits. So again, I don't think that everything about game mechanics should be implemented into Death Battle, but that is a thing. Like, I would understand if that one were implemented because, again, there's an in-game way for Tracer to get essentially critical hits, and there is no way for Scout to get critical hits aside from randomness. And if the Scout won a Death Battle by a random critical hit, do you know how people would rage? Not that people don't rage anyway, but you know what I mean. So to wrap up this little section, this is what I think. In a melee-only battle, so like, right up in each other's faces with melee weapons, the Scout would win due to slightly higher damage and slightly faster attacking speeds. At medium range, if headshots are not a thing for Tracer, I think that the Scout would win with this pistol if they landed again perfectly every shot. And at point blank range, Tracer would win. She just does the damage faster. I come now from a few hours into the future to say one more thing that I forgot to mention. At long range, the Scout would also win if they both landed their shots perfectly and the Scout stuck with his pistol. Because while Tracer can have a higher damage output, she would have to reload too many times and doing only 1 damage per bullet, so even with the 40 bullets, Scout with his minimum of 8 with the pistol would just do more damage. It would take her a little over 6 seconds and Scout about 4.5 seconds for the two to kill each other. So he would win long range if they were just kind of stuck there and had perfect aim. But now we can't think of just numbers, we have to also think about what these two characters are capable of, their feats, their abilities, that sort of thing. So let's again look first at Scout, and then we can move on to Tracer later. The Scout is the fastest character in Team Fortress 2, running at 133%. So you take like the normal character from Team Fortress 2, like the Engineer or the Sniper or the Spy, they're all at 100%. The Scout is at 133%, so he is like a third faster than those guys. And if you've ever played Team Fortress 2, it's definitely noticeable that he's faster. It absolutely is. And he is faster than Tracer. I will totally give him that. I am not gonna try to like BS my way out of that. No, Scout is faster than Tracer. At least as far as like normal physical movement goes. The Scout can also defy physics and just double jump. Like he could just jump and then jump again in the air. You know, like you do in most video games. But in that one, okay, maybe not most, but in TF2, he is the only character who can double jump. So when playing as a Scout in Team Fortress 2, you try to take advantage of your speed and your double jumps in order to like really, you know, flank the enemy, to confuse the enemy if you're fighting in like a head-on kind of situation, and get the upper hand that way. You don't necessarily have to kill people, but hit and run to distract the tougher guys, to chip off damage, like that kind of thing. Well, I guess chip off health, but with, you know, damage. So something to think about with the Scout going into Death Battle is that he's fast, he can position himself pretty quickly, and with his double jump and just his speed, you know, he can both confuse the enemy and just get in and out quickly. He can position himself where he wants to be for what he wants to do. But that's pretty much all the Scout can do, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But now to look at Tracers. In Overwatch, she plays pretty much the same role, where she's a flanker, she wants to go down and take out those like high priority targets, like the medics that hang around in the back, or snipers or that kind of thing, or to harass enemies, the bigger guys, to keep them away from the objective, to chip away at their health, etc. Oh, and in talking about, you know, Scout and Tracer's objectives in the game, y'all can differ but I'm pretty sure that those are like some of their big things of what they're supposed to do in the game. Not to say that if you don't do those things, like if you try to take on a heavy one-on-one and you're a really good scout, maybe you could do it, but of equal level, like that's just not probably something you should be doing to best benefit your team. I mean, these characters have these abilities, their health pools, that kind of thing for a reason, so try to make use of them. But now to focus on Tracer's abilities, one that she has is called the Blink, where she can actually just move in time. And the only limitations we have on that ability so far come from the in-game mechanics. Like, there are no limitations that we've seen in the cutscenes so far, like in the cinematic trailers or whatnot, so we just have to go off the game mechanics if they are going to limit her blinking at all. So as far as the game mechanics go, she can hold 3 blinks at a time, and each one recharges individually after 3 seconds. Each blink can carry her 7 meters in any direction. She doesn't have to be facing it, she can just blink in that direction. So she can kind of just dart around 3 times, and then she has to recharge, but it's really good. Blink, like the double jump, can be used to get into position or out of danger, or just to confuse the opponent as you fire at them. Or of course, if you're not pressured, you could just use it to go faster, like to get to the objective or whatnot. But it's mostly used or recommended to save your blinks for like when you're actually in combat and need to use it to either escape, get in a better position, or just to confuse your opponent in general. Now this is where it gets interesting for me regarding the blink. In the game, you can only go horizontally and it doesn't affect your falling speed. Like you will, if you're falling and then you blink, you'll continue to fall, you'll just be in another like X coordinate at that point. In the cutscenes though, like if we look at the Overwatch cinematic trailer, where, you know, Tracer, Winston, Reaper, Widowmaker are in the Numbani Museum to get the Doomfist Gauntlet, you know, that kind of thing, with the 2 kids. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about maybe if you've seen it. Anyway, Tracer was shown to like jump up blocks, like from the ground floor to get to the roof in like a very quick time using her blink. So in that one, it's not limited like at all. I mean, I'm not saying okay, I assume there are limits to the distance, but they haven't laid them out for us. And it just like, in the cinematic trailer, her blink has a lot more freedom of movement. Basically though, what I'm getting at is that I think the blink and the double jump are quite comparable. But the double jump, you know, as far as game mechanics go compared to the blink's game mechanics, you know, you can have some vertical change too. With blink though, I think that it's faster than, you know, it's faster than just double jumping or sprinting around, you know, and the opponent can't like, they can't track you. You know, like if you're a good player against an enemy scout, you can follow them as they jump around or run around or whatever. But with Tracer, the blinks, you have to find them again. It's not you're tracking them, it's they're gone from the location they were, you have to find them again before you can actually take any action. And I mean, when a Tracer can blink behind you, and you have to like turn around to find them, at that point they could already unload their pistol into your back. Or, you know, if they're smarter, into your head. So while the Scouts is passive and impressive in its own right, I think that Tracer's is just more versatile and can help her get the upper hand a lot better. Tracer's other ability is called Recall, and as far as in-game mechanics go, because again, outside of the game mechanics, we haven't been told any limitations or exactly what it can do, though it was shown briefly in the cinematic short Alive with Tracer and Widowmaker, which I would recommend. It was a good short. She also blinks like all the way up a staircase, so again, no limitations as far as the number goes on that one. But yes, Recall. In the game, it takes her 3 seconds back in time, or to where she was 3 seconds in time, and it regains any health that she had lost during that time. So I mean, if Tracer had 150 health, she walks out a door, gets sniped, and only has 1 health after that, so like the snipe did 149 damage, she would recall, go back to where she was 3 seconds earlier, and have full health again. Since I'm talking about this stuff under the assumption that the Scout is going to use his stock weapons, he can't debuff Tracer, but if he could with another weapon, then Recall can actually get rid of all debuffs too, even if the debuffs weren't given to them within those 3 seconds. If you play Overwatch and you're wondering about an example of that, say a Zenyatta, an enemy Zenyatta, put a Discord orb on you, and he's staying within your line of sight. You know, so you would have that Discord orb for as long as he stayed within your line of sight and survived, which could be well over 3 seconds. If you recalled, even after like 10 seconds had passed, you would no longer have the Discord orb on you. And if you haven't played Overwatch, that probably made no sense. When using Recall, the enemies cannot see where you're going. You are just gone. You are not existing on that plane at the time of their using it. You just appear wherever you were 3 seconds later, and then, or 3 seconds prior, and then you're good to keep going. So much like the blink, the enemies have to, again, find you. They can't track you, they just have to find you again. If they knew where you were 3 seconds prior, they could take advantage of that, but that requires, you know, actually thinking during the heat of battle like that. Not that thinking during battle is impossible, I'm just saying that it's another cognitive task you need to accomplish in order to find them immediately before they can shoot you. Like, I've done it in Overwatch. I'm saying it is possible, but it is another thing that you have to do. If we're talking again about the in-game mechanics, it has a 12-second cooldown, but that's, you know, and like during battle, that can suck. But, you know, that's full health. Like, that gives you full health again, or, well, it goes back to wherever you were health-wise 3 seconds previous. So it can be a lifesaver is the thing. Now, the last ability that Tracer has, which I didn't talk about with the weapons, and perhaps I should have, but I didn't, is her Pulse Bomb. It is her ultimate, as every character in Overwatch has a unique ultimate, so over time, with the damage that she does, she builds it up from 0% to 100%, and when it's ready, it is a Pulse Bomb. So she throws out this sticky bomb that, you know, it sticks to whatever surface or enemy that it comes in contact with, and blows up shortly afterward. It has a 3 meter explosive radius and does 400 damage with some fall off the farther away opponents are, and it can hurt her admittedly. However, a good Tracer, I would imagine, would employ the strategy often used by people in the Overwatch game, and that is to blink up to someone or behind someone or whatever, stick them with the Pulse Bomb, and then recall back to where they were 3 seconds previous. So it makes it so, you know, they don't have that for another 12 seconds, the recall, and that could put them in danger. But with a successful stick, if that's the only enemy in sight, they're dead. And that's definitely something to think about in Death Battle, because it's just Tracer and Scout, no one else. If Tracer only has to focus on the Scout, and she could get into quick position with Scout using her blinks, she can stick him with the Pulse Bomb, and then recall to get out of there. It is a good strategy in Overwatch, and it would be a fantastic strategy in this Death Battle. There's no way to get rid of it once you're stuck. Even if you aren't stuck with it, it can sometimes be hard to maneuver out of the way. I think that the Scout could be able to do it with his double jump and just inherent speed, but it's still, again, another thing to avoid during the heat of battle. Not to mention that while the Scout, like, say the Tracer didn't successfully stick the Scout and just threw it on the ground, while the Scout's getting out of the way of that, Tracer has total freedom to fire at him. That is a thing that she can do. She's not frozen once she throws it. She can run, she can blink, she can recall, she can do whatever she would normally do. So at this point, we've talked about Scouts and Tracer's weapons and abilities, and they don't really have armor, so we can't cover that part of the whole Death Battle thing. But now I think it's time to talk about a little bit of their backstory and like what they've accomplished in the canon of their respective universes. I will be the first to admit that I don't keep up with comics, so if the Scout was featured in comics and he did cool things there, I unfortunately have not seen it, but I have seen all of the official TF2 shorts, like animated shorts with SFM or things like that, and they're not all in Scout's favor. Not even are they not all in Scout's favor, but the cool things that Scout is capable of is kind of iffy to me. Basically, with the Scout in these shorts, like, I think 3 things are possible. Either that is not all the same Scout, the Scout keeps being brought back to life by like the medic or something, or a mix of the two. What I mean is that these characters in Team Fortress 2 are not exactly unique. There are the same characters in, like, on Blue Team as there are on Red Team. If you want an example, though, of just how they can even be, like, the same character on the same team, look at Meet the Medic. In Meet the Medic, you see this army of blue soldiers coming toward all the red guys. All of them blue soldiers. Those are all the same character. Now, if you were to tell me that one soldier got his PhD in something awesome, and then the other soldier just like went on a huge killing spree of like 25 people in a row, and he didn't get a scratch on him, and then you tried to argue that those were the same person with those like, no, those are different people, they're just both soldier. I don't think it's fair to say that the accomplishments of several just kind of like crammed down into one person. But about the whole like being resurrected by the medic thing, brought back to life, like we see Scout die multiple times, just off the top of my head. So in Meet the Demo Man, we see him die to a sentry as he and the Demo Man are running up to it. In Meet the Engineer, we hear and see him die. Like, I feel multiple times, but like at least the scream sounded like him multiple times and the death counter went up. In Meet the Sandwich, we don't have it confirmed that he died, but he did get beaten up pretty badly by the Heavy, and I quote, "My blood, he punched out all of my blood." What else was there? Meet the Pyro, he died in Meet the Pyro. It didn't show him dying in Meet the Spy, however, he was not there, so he was disposed of in some way, is the most likely scenario. I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is this, we've seen him die a lot. That's not good for someone going up into Death Battle. Now, I'm not saying he hasn't done any cool things. Like, if you look at the expiration date video, we see him as being pretty darn agile. Not the brightest, but pretty darn agile, like able to like slide off of tentacles and then drop and tuck and roll and just like dodge around everything. Like, he is definitely good on his feet. Same with End of the Line. We see him like running on top of train cars, jumping from an RV onto the train cars in the first place, jumping off of a very quickly moving train and just rolling and then getting up and like going with it. Like, he's good. He is. And in Meet the Scout, we do see him take on a heavy all by himself, but again, in the Meet the videos, it kind of like really shows, it exaggerates the person's like good quality, you know what I mean? Like in Meet the Engineer has like several sentries set up, which, you know, you can't have in game, but in Meet the Demo Man, he has a ton more stickies than are allowed in game, but so in Meet the Scout, is it possible they exaggerated what he could do against a heavy? Yeah. Does that necessarily mean that we should count that out? No, but it's something to keep in mind that that stuff is exaggerated. But if we are to overlook the exaggeration thing, I think perhaps the most impressive thing the Scout has done, in my opinion, to demonstrate his strength, aside from his agility, is in Meet the Scout, he has a bat, or he's behind the heavy, and he has a bat to heavy weapon guy's neck, and you see the heavy like trying to pull it, but the Scout's winning. Now the Scout has some like momentum and everything on his side, like he has the leverage in the position that he's in, but still with the heavy strength, he is heavy weapons guy carrying around that big old minigun. It's impressive, it is. And in my opinion, I think it's things like that that would conflict with the 35 melee damage that the Scout is able to do as far as in-game mechanics go. Now in cinematic shorts, we have also seen Tracer be agile, we've also seen her think quickly on her feet, and not so much in cinematic shorts, but in her backstory. Oh, yeah, let's just compare backstories now. Scout's backstory is like, when he was a little kid, he had 7 or 8 brothers in Boston, I believe it was, and they all, like, they went to fight. I don't know, they just went out to fight. And the Scout had to learn to be fast so he could actually get to the fight before it was finished. So he just kept running and running, and now he's fast. And that's good. That means at a very young age, like, well, I mean, it's not good, but at a very young age, he had a lot of fighting experience, right? However, those are just little neighborhood thugs. Not real combat, really. So now Tracer's backstory. What we know of her is that Overwatch selected her to be the pilot for their test plane, the Slipstream, which was a fighter jet that used teleportation technology. Now they used her, like they picked her because they knew she was a fearless pilot. Like Tracer was one of the youngest pilots, and I just have to assume the British Air Force just because she is, you know, British. But I could be wrong. Anyway, to be an Air Force like fighter jet pilot, you know, there are some requirements there. I actually looked them up, and I couldn't quite find all of the stuff for the British Air Force. To me, it seemed like there were fewer requirements than the American, like the US Air Force, but I'm not like pointing fingers or saying that one is better than the other. I'm just saying that from the information I found online, there were more requirements for the US Air Force, but there are still educational and fitness requirements for both of them. So she had to pass those first. She was the youngest, like I think she was one of the youngest pilots, you know, there, and she was chosen for an experimental teleporting plane. Yeah, and this is actually how she got the chronal accelerator and how she got like the blink and recall, able to control her own timeline kind of powers, is that she teleported with the Slipstream and the plane disappeared, and she disappeared for a long time too, and then she started phasing in and out of reality like this ghost. She was intangible and everything, and one of the scientists for Overwatch, Winston, the gorilla that's playable, he created the chronal accelerator, which you see strapped to her chest, and it allows her, yes, to anchor herself in time, but also to control her own timeline, to speed up or slow down her timeline as she chooses. After that event, and once she was successfully anchored back into reality, she was given like basic field training instead, like combat training, you know, instead of flying. So she already had the experience of, you know, being a fighter jet pilot, and now she was given the experience of being a ground soldier. She was not around for the Omnic Crisis, but she has been around to clean up the residual effects of that, you know, with the Talon organization and everything. So there are still definitely a lot of big fights for her to take part in. She is also possibly just slightly older than the Scout. The Scout is at least 23 years old, but maybe older. If you look at him though, I wouldn't say much older. And Lena, or Tracer, is 26. So, you know, a little more life experience if you think that means anything. But as far as actual like combat experience, while the Scout might have more as far as like numbers go, I think that Tracer's is like more, it's in-depth, it is more real combat. Again, as I mentioned, the Scout at a young age ran off to fight the neighborhood thugs, but that's really all they were, and even now, he is just a mercenary fighting other mercenaries who don't necessarily have, like, special combat training, like the soldier, I imagine, does, you know, and, you know, I'm sure other people do too, like a heavy weapons guy. But not everyone. Tracer, on the other hand, you know, after being the fighter jet pilot and now fighting with Overwatch, you know, this group of, like, they're supremely talented people. I assume they're like the best of the best. You know, these are deadly people with actual training in many, many cases. Basically, I think that overall, you know, in TF2, they're fighting this family feud, and in Overwatch, they're fighting a war. It's different, the skill set level to me. And if we're looking at the cast of characters too, there are 9 different classes, you know, including the Scout in Team Fortress 2, and there are 21 different playable characters in Overwatch at the moment. So if we're actually going to consider, you know, Tracer having fought all of them and Scout having fought all of them, Tracer has much more variety in the opponents that she's faced, not to mention one that can double jump. That's again only if you're going to consider the opponents they might have faced like non-canonically, because we haven't seen a ton with Overwatch yet. And to finally wrap this video up, here are some of my basic thoughts. While the Scout might have more combat experience as far as like time goes, I think that Tracer's combat experience is a lot more in-depth and just benefits her a lot better on the battlefield, especially in these kind of conditions. I mean, think about being a fighter jet pilot. You have to be able to have fast reflexes and be able to track your opponent in, you know, when you're flying around like that in order to be accurate and everything. So I don't think that she'll have too big of a problem tracking the Scout as he moves and double jumps around. While the Scout might have the upper hand if he were just to use his pistol or his bat, you know, medium range or right up close, and you know, she also had to use her melee or whatever in that case, that's obviously not how the death battle is going to go down. You know, they're both free to switch their weapons as they please, and I just think that in the majority of situations, Tracer has this, maybe not because of the range, but because she has a better control of the battlefield with her blinks and her recall abilities. Because while the Scout's is passive, and maybe all around more beneficial, Tracer can use hers to get into key positions, to get out when she needs to, and that is even considering the limitations imposed by the gameplay mechanics, even if there aren't limitations by like the cutscene standards. At close range, both characters using their primary weapons, Tracer would win by 0.25 seconds if they each landed every shot. And even if Tracer wasn't able to land every shot, her reload is a lot faster. It takes 1 second to empty her entire clip and 1 second to reload her entire clip. Whereas the Scout has to take a little over half a second just to reload his first shot. So assuming I did the math correctly, it takes Tracer 1 second to reload her pulse pistols, and it takes the Scout 3.56 seconds to reload his scattergun all the way. This is assuming that Scout is only going to be using his stock weapons, but even if we do take into consideration all of the different combinations of the other weapons he can use, what Death Battle is about, in my understanding, is who would win the majority of the time. And I think that the majority of the time, Tracer will be able to position herself well enough where she could take advantage of the Scout's weaknesses and just take care of him. She might not have the same versatility in her weaponry, but she does have more versatility in her abilities. She has that self-healing option that can really save her life, and just with her damage output, while he might do more damage, she can do it a lot faster. So yes, with repeats and all, those are my thoughts on Tracer versus the Scout. I haven't watched either of the previews, as you know, and maybe I should mention that at the beginning, but you know, I just don't watch the previews. I wait until the entire Death Battle comes out and then I watch it all at once. But that's really what I really think that this battle depends on, is whether or not they're gonna let Scout have all of his weapons. Because I think, again, that would be unfair and illogical. I would not be down for that. Aside from that, I really believe that most of the time, Tracer would beat the Scout. Do I think that the Scout could kill Tracer? Absolutely. Let's say that he stunned her with the Sandman and then threw a guillotine at her face. She'd probably die. But is that what's going to happen the majority of the time these two fight in our imaginations? No. So with all of that said, Tracer is going to win the next death battle, and we're calling it here. Cue outro, go!